Well, again, good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Salvatore Siriano. Welcome to Triton College's virtual lecture recital series. I'm the lead music instructor here at Triton. Thank you for joining us this evening. I want to let everyone know we are recording this event. This is a webinar, so your video will always be off. If you have any questions for Dr. Konishi, you can type them in the Q&A section below. I'm going to share a copy of the program in the message section if anyone's interested. Before we start, I would just like to tell you a little bit about Akiko. Akiko Konishi received her early training in Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and subsequently completed her undergraduate studies at Rice University as a double major in music and English. She continued her graduate studies at Yale University and University of Houston under the guidance of renowned pianists Peter Frankel and Abby Simon. She has appeared as a soloist with multiple orchestras, including the Shepherd School Symphony, the Angelo Competition Orchestra, and the Oakland Symphony, just to name a few. Dr. Konishi performs extensively in guest artist venues across the United States and is also an active chamber musician performing with members of the Houston Symphony in the Channing Chamber Series, and has toured Italy and Bulgaria as a winner of the Mercandante International Chamber Music Competition. Her performances have been broadcast on Houston's public radios, The Front Row, and Italian national TV. Additional honors include finalist prizes in the Emma Hogg Houston Symphony Concerto Competition and the F. Auerbach International Piano Competition, as well as grand prizes in the Entergy Young Texas Artist Competition and the Rio Hondo Symphony Concerto Competition in Los Angeles. During past seasons, she has appeared as a guest artist at Oberlin College Conservatory of Music and in repeat performances with the Chicago Federation of Musicians Orchestra. Dr. Konishi currently teaches right here applied music and keyboard at Triton College. Since 2013, she's also been on the music faculty of the Chautauqua Institution, a summer music program for advanced collegiate students in New York. She's also a devoted pedagogue to pre-collegiate students and teaches from her private studio in Chicago. Her students have won numerous awards, most recently the Young Stunning Way Concert Series in Skokie. It is my pleasure to introduce all of you, Akiko Konishi. Akiko, welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Professor Siriano, for that wonderful introduction. I'm very excited to play for you guys today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the first piece, which is the Beethoven Waldstein Sonata. The Waldstein is sort of a nickname that most people refer to it as the Waldstein Sonata because Beethoven dedicated this to his good friend and patron, which is a sponsor, Count von Waldstein. So this piece is what most performers consider a bear of a piece, just in scope and also technical difficulty. I chose for you today to play the first movement, which is about 10 minutes long. And it's one of my favorite pieces because of its contrast. You will hear a lot of militant, almost aggressive rhythms juxtaposed with these gorgeous chorale-like melodies. So hopefully you'll listen for those changes. It's a lot of contrast. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to play that for you real quick. I just want to mention to our Music 110 students, because we're actually starting the classical period right now. And one of the things that we're talking about is that one of the big shifts from Baroque to the classical period is this contrast of mood, contrast of texture within individual movements, which we did not see as we listened to pieces, say, concerto or whatnot from the Baroque pieces that they were exposed to. So this is a very good example, introduction to them, since we're literally starting it this week. So thank you. All right, so we will be back. So here's our first performance for the evening. Okay, and we're back. Thank you very much. I'm sure if we could hear everyone, they'll be clapping. So if you want to introduce us to the next piece, or even if anyone has any questions about the Beethoven piece right now that you may want to ask before we move on while you're thinking about it, or certainly we can come back to it at the end as well. Okay, all right, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Well, the next piece actually is from a completely different stylistic and time period. It was written in 1937 by the Argentinian composer Alberto Ginastera. And I think in more ways than one, this is a very modern and innovative piece. And one of the most, I think, obvious one is the use of bitonality in the first dance. So this whole piece consists of a set of 3 dances, with the outer dances being very fast and with a very slow lyrical dance in the middle. So the opening dance, you will see from the video also that my right hand will be playing under. Actually, I have to figure this out first. So my left hand will be playing on all black keys. So it will not even touch the white key area at all. So you'll see this, and then the white keys will be played by my right hand. So it will be just under, sometimes kind of overlapping, sometimes completely overlapped. So you will hear this very jarring sense of, I guess, dissonance, because it just doesn't sound right, where, you know, he basically composed this whole dance and with using 2 scales basically. So that is one. I feel that the second dance is also very creative, because it is almost like movie music, but instead of our usual use of triads, which are based on thirds, he decided to use just ample intervals with fourths and fifths. So there's a wider range slightly in harmony. And some scholars consider that evocative of the Argentinian landscape. And, you know, this was the composer yearning and pining for the countryside. And then the third dance, which is quite the crowd pleaser, and also it's very taxing for the performer, because it's just this one perpetual motion 4-minute dance where there's absolutely no break, no rests. It's also titled the Dance of the Outlaw Cowboy. So another thing that's interesting with these pieces, that 2 outer fast dances are named after cowboys, or gauchos, in Argentinian culture. So there's a lot of these, this romping rhythmic flair, so to speak. And this third one, the third dance, you see these instructions like savagely or violently. So it is, I try, when I prepare this piece for concerts, I try not to overdo it during practice, because after one run, I'm exhausted. So I try to practice sparingly, but I hope you enjoy all 3. They're all very beautiful and catchy.
Yes, and I can attest to it. I had the pleasure to, before the pandemic, to see Akiko perform it in person, which was it was actually one of the last things that I saw before
Right.
we went on lockdown. So you're in for a treat. So without further ado, we will be back in a little bit, and we'll present this to you now. Well, thank you again. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us all. And I guess that brings us to the next piece. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the rest of the program? Okay. Well, I'll start a little bit, but then if you could welcome some of your comments. Dr. Konishi, over the summer, discussed wanting to have a program, even knowing that we were hopeful that hopefully by this time that maybe we could have a performance in person, but knew that the reality was that it would likely be virtual, which it is, which is why we're all here staring at each other's screens. But she did ask if I knew of any composers or whatnot looking to work on a new piece. And luckily for me, she asked me, and of course, as a composer, I'm going to volunteer myself. And hopefully she doesn't regret it.
Oh, no, not at all. This is great.
So as you can imagine, just by hearing Akiko playing, that it is quite an honor to be able, someone who's a composer like myself, to be able to write a work for her, knowing that it's in very good hands and that's going to be played beyond what you could expect, which is the case here. The piece does require a little bit of explanation because it incorporates the title of the piece, which I actually didn't even come up with till recently, is Reflections for Amplified Piano. And for the last couple of years, I've been very interested in electronic music, mostly in programming with a program called Max, MSP. And those of you that attended the Crystal Cortez recital in February, she did a performance of almost all exclusively electronic music using Max. My background is writing for acoustic instruments, so this is something rather new to me. And about 2 years ago, a colleague of mine who actually may be on, I think he's with us today, his name is Russell Monahan. I composed a piece for trumpet and then also electronics using a sample guitar, and we kind of performed it together, and it was 2 separate pieces. My thought for Akiko was that I could write a piece that uses electronics, but it's using the sounds that she is creating that is coming out of the piano. And what seemed to work well is a method called granular synthesis. And that is the idea as Akiko's piano is mic'd, as the sounds are coming through, I've written, a program or a patch or whatever you want to call it in Max that kind of dissects and takes these little pieces of the piano and kind of spreads it out, or I can have it randomly take little snippets or long snippets, and I can also change the pitch. So there's certain times you're going to hear kind of a swirling effect, and that's from stretching out these grains and then have them each slightly change pitch. So as she plays through, the program kind of runs through different settings based on kind of what I predetermined. And one of the things I like about electronic music is that it can be very random. Even if you program it, you get something different every time. And as Akiko can tell you, I mean, a performer will say that as well. But I just, each performance is going to be a little different. But this is truly random where, it could have 1,000 different possibilities at any given moment, depending on what you set it to do. And the hard part for me, and Akiko, we were actually talking about this, when you're performing virtual, it's like, when's it good enough? Because you know that you could technically do it again if you wanted to, and you can keep going over and over. So I kind of just let it run through as if it was a live performance, and to best replicate what you would have heard if you were in a concert hall. Just 2 things I want to mention from the piece itself. As a composer, a modern composer, we're constantly thinking about how are we going to organize the pitches? And it's something that Ginastera had to think about as well, because kind of after Beethoven, it was kind of like tonality was like he mastered it, and everyone kind of emulated or tried to find their own identity, which caused kind of tonality to fall apart by the 20th century, which is the idea of the major scale or the minor scale. So when I got to college, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to write major and minor music, this beautiful music. And instead, my composition tutor was like, no, take 3 notes and create a piece with that. And then you kind of learn your own language. And so the 2 themes that I kind of have going on in this piece that might be helpful to listen for, since it's going to be, I think, a little different than what your ears may be used to hearing, is this first theme that opens the piece. I use that as kind of the framework, and I use it almost as a memory throughout the piece. It changes, not so much as develops, but sometimes has a couple notes different here and there, almost as if you're thinking about a memory through different times, past, present, and so forth. And then another little fragment that kind of makes an appearance and then finally kind of fleshes itself out towards the end is a slower idea that goes like this. So you get little allusions to it throughout the piece, and then finally it's kind of allowed to play itself out towards the end of the piece. So I don't know if you wanted to contribute anything to as far as working on a new piece that you haven't seen before or not familiar with the composer or the style or anything like that.
Sure, just a few very brief things. As a performer, I think my first initial concern is always, does it fit my hands? So I remember telling Salvatore, after the first month of looking at it, my first comments were, oh, great, it fits my hands. It's great. There's no awkward writing. And not that I've encountered that a lot, but there have been times when it's very clear that, the composer had a great idea, but it wasn't written idiomatically for the piano. So, and that obviously was not a problem in your piece at all. I was also very impressed by the craftsmanship. You had just mentioned the two themes. And obviously, and also going back to what you said about recording, I did record this several times, and there were points where, you hear me cursing, after like 7 minutes of it, and I'll scrap the recording. But during those several takes, I would actually notice more and more about, there was one part in, I think, the 6th page or 5th page where I didn't realize that the theme was the opening motive was embedded into the left-hand chords. And so the next time around, I was like, oh, I could bring that out more. So it was a great learning experience for me too, as I, got more comfortable with playing it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative. I was so excited to hear it. This is,
Great.
for a composer, it doesn't get more exciting than this moment right now. So without further ado, we will present to you Reflections for Amplified Piano. And again, so you're listening to, as you listen, you are hearing Akiko's piano, but it's also, as it's being microphoned, it's being fed through the program Max, which is again, using a granular synthesized type program that I created to enhance the piece, but it's all the sounds are originating from her piano. So hope you enjoy it. It's about 12 minutes long, so we'll see you in a little bit. We'll wait a minute for, oh, there we are. Well, thank you again. It was such a pleasure to hear that. And it was such a, truly it was an honor for you to play one of my pieces. It was truly memorable.
Oh no, it's my pleasure. Thank you for, I'm so glad that, this project kind of came together at the right time.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Especially something to do while we're all home. So
That's right.
We have just a couple minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Dennis says brava. So.
Thank you, Dennis.
Bravo. One of your students who said thank you for a wonderful concert.
Yes.
So, yes. Quick question before we go. Just as a performer, we do have I think we do have a question. Asha, do you have a question? Asha, you can speak if you
okay. So hello, thank you for wonderful performance. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure we all did. I'm curious about the process of learning a new piece and getting ready for a performance.
That's a great question. I think it's highly individualized. Everyone has, everyone's a different learner, as with all fields. For me, I think the initial note learning process takes the longest. And then by the time you are comfortable with the notes, I talk to my students about this all the time. You are pretty much semi-memorized at that point. And then from there on, the actual, what I call marinating process of a new piece is that really depends on the piece, I think. But usually I try to get the notes down, the details from, and I carry around the music all the time. I tell all my students never to just think, okay, I could just, get rid of the music and that's it. I know it by heart is not a good way to go for these things. So I do, and most performers I know usually bring their music even backstage. So I'm a very visual learner, and I think that's the most reliable way, visual memory, instead of just learning by muscle memory. So it's a combination of all three. I think it's muscle memory, visual memory, and also oral memory, all three. But, in a high pressure situation, you really definitely want to solidify and secure your visual memory, because that doesn't go away immediately. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, it does. I'm just curious because you make it look so effortless.
And thank you. Thanks. It's it's a good act, I guess.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Asha. Let me check the Q&A. One question is just the sound effects in the last piece. So that's a program called Max. It's a visual programming language. So you're basically, you're writing your own programs that are music. So it's the vastness of Max is that it's completely open. It's whatever you want it to be. There's this kind of a steep learning curve once you start, but once you get the hang of it, then it really can be, you can think of an idea, which is what was the process with this piece when we first discussed with Akiko. I wanted to incorporate some kind of electronics with it. What would work best using her actual piano sound? That's kind of where the idea of programming something with granular synthesis and different sounds that could kind of swirl around and change and be random. So, and then I think another question, let's see if there's any more. One is just the composing and the notation. The notation, for my piece, I use pretty much traditional notation. I had a couple of block chords where it doesn't really matter where the pianist is playing, just kind of in a general area, just to kind of get that sound. I'm not sure if the Ginastera piece, if he had any kind of interesting notation or if he wrote in a pretty traditional format for his scores.
I would say it's pretty traditional, yeah. Just as I mentioned before, the instructions are a little non-traditional, like savagely is not something you'd see in a Beethoven score, but as far as the actual musical notations, it's still traditional, I believe.
Okay. Any other questions for Akiko before we end the evening? Let me see more. Just a couple more things. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all the questions. One was this, that were you able to hear the electronic beforehand, or you just, I know the answer, but you know, the score as it was presented to you, you know, as far as the last piece, our piece together.
No, but I did see some ad lib type instructions, or I don't know if it was clear in the video. You had mentioned to improvise, and then also I did not strum the insides of the piano this time. There were some logistical issues with the score in front of me, but I did actually slam the bottom of the keys, the wooden, so right underneath the keys with my right hand. If you saw me leaning a little, that was so you heard a little wooden like smacking sound. Hopefully that translated.
No, and it did. And that was one of the things we discussed, because there were some parts to, you know, for Akiko to improvise and do things like that, because again, all the sounds that were coming from the effects were coming from Akiko's piano. So any kind of odd sound or rumble or rattle or anything just added to the overall kind of ambience and sounds that were kind of being granulated. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Put it together. I just want to take a moment. This concludes our presentation here at Triton College. I want to thank Akiko Konishi for such a wonderful evening. And again, personally, just for taking the time to learn one of my works. It's a really special moment. I would also like to thank President Mary Rita Moore, Vice President Dr. Susan Campos, Dean of Arts and Sciences Kevin Lee, Associate Dean of College Readiness Rick Segovia, and VPC Department Chairperson Dennis McNamara for their support in implementing this virtual series. Thank you all for attending. Our next event is going to be April 27th, which will feature multiple performances by our Triton voice and piano students, including piano students of Akiko. So hope you can all join us on Tuesday, April 27th. You can check our music Facebook page and we'll send out some notices in between. So everyone have a good night. Akiko, thank you again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All soon.
Bye-bye. Thanks for coming.